Vlad series. Chains of a Prince. 1431, the Blood Moon. Birth. December 1431. The winds of the Carpathians howled through the pine forests, carrying omens across snow and stone in the Transylvanian town of Sighiswara. Beneath a red, swollen moon, a child came into the world, not in peace, but under prophecy. His name was Vlad. History would remember him as Dracula. But monsters are not born. They are forged. In fear, in fire, in betrayal. 1431, 1436, Bloodline of Fire. Vlad was born the second son of Vlad II, Dracula, ruler of Wallachia. His father walked a knife's edge between two titans, the Catholic Kingdom of Hungary to the west, the Ottoman Empire to the east. In 1431, the very year of Vlad's birth, Dracula joined the secret Christian Order of the Dragon, swearing loyalty to defend Christendom against the Ottoman tide. From this came his name, Dracula, the dragon, and so Vlad became Dracula, the son of the dragon. His mother, Nyajna of Moldavia, was a woman of silence and snow, noble, watchful, full of pride. From her, Vlad inherited steel in the soul and storm in the eyes. He had two brothers, Myarshia, the eldest, strong, noble, faithful to the death. But in this world, faith is a blade that cuts its bearer. Snabadu, the youngest, graceful, soft-eyed, seductive. His path would be lined with silk and betrayal. Between them stood Vlad, silent, burning, watching. 1442, the Ottoman Pact. In 1442, Wallachia was once again at war. Vlad II, weakened and desperate, sought peace with Sultan Murad II of the Ottomans. But the cost of peace was not gold. It was blood. The Sultan demanded two of his sons as hostages. And so Vlad, age 11, and Radu, age 7, were taken across the Danube to the Ottoman court at Edirne. Not as princes, but as pawns. 1442, 1447, the fire inside. Edirne was a golden prison, marble floors, peacock gardens, 1,000 whispers in languages Vlad could not understand. Radu flourished. He danced, learned, sang. The Ottoman Prince Mehmed took a liking to him, but Vlad did not bow. He learned their ways but never forgot his own. He endured beatings, silence, and humiliation, and swallowed them like poison. He would one day return. One night, in 1444, he witnessed his first impalement. No screams, just a slow death drawn over hours, and something in him snapped. 1447, blood betrayed. By the winter of 1447, a letter arrived. His father had been murdered, his brother Mirsha buried alive. Wallachia had fallen into chaos, and Vlad, now 16, was no longer a boy. He was a storm waiting to be unleashed. Spring 1448, 17-year-old Vlad stood again at the gates of Wallachia. Not as a boy, not yet a man, but as a shadow bearing the memory of fire. The Ottomans had sent him back to reclaim the throne, a calculated move. They believed he was broken, tame, molded by chains, but what returned was no puppet. What returned was a blade honed in silence. His first reign would last only weeks, but history would remember it as the first spark. The boyars, Wallachia's noble elite, hissed behind veils of silk and wine. They had spilled Dracula's blood. They had buried Mircea alive. Now they smiled at his son. They thought Vlad was a lamb returned from the wolf's den, but the lamb had learned from wolves. He had become one. They plotted. Hungary invaded. Vlad, outnumbered and isolated, was forced into exile, but what fled that night was not fear. It was a storm in retreat, preparing to return with thunder. For 7 years, Vlad wandered through the ashes of kingdoms. He sought no rest, only purpose. In Moldavia, he studied diplomacy. In Hungary, he learned to read the language of betrayal. In Transylvania, he trained with mercenaries, the kind who knew 50 ways to kill and 1 way to survive. He shared bread with outlaws, fought duels in forests, spoke to monks about power and to thieves about justice, and every night he dreamed of stakes rising like trees. July 1456, when Vlad returned, the world did not notice. He came with no fanfare, no army, only a gaze that froze breath and a silence that made men confess sins they hadn't yet committed. This time, he didn't ask for the throne. He took it. Hungarian support, local allies, a lightning campaign, swift and surgical. The boyars watched in horror. This was not the Vlad they remembered. This was a man reborn in rage. To celebrate his return, Vlad hosted a lavish Easter feast in Targovishte. The boyars came, dressed in arrogance, furs, jewels, mocking laughter. He welcomed them with smiles. Wine flowed, music danced. Then the doors locked. The music stopped, and Vlad stood, calm, unblinking. He recited one by one the names of the boyars who betrayed his father, the ones who buried Mirke alive, the ones who tried to kill him. They laughed at first, until guards appeared, chains rattled, and the first stake rose. By morning, hundreds were impaled outside the city gates, a forest of agony, a warning carved in blood. Wallachia woke up to a new ruler, and his name was justice.
In the months that followed, Vlad transformed Wallachia, not with speeches, but with fear. He restructured the law, swift, brutal, incorruptible, built roads, protected merchants, restored trade. But mercy was scarce. A woman who stole bread? Branded. A tax collector caught cheating the poor? Impaled on a stake greased with his own gold. One story tells of a golden goblet placed at a public well, untouched for weeks. Why? Because people feared what Vlad would do if it disappeared. Though crime vanished, merchants from Saxony returned, fields were sown without fear, peasants who once lived like prey now walked under the sun. But behind every act of order was a shadow. Vlad ruled through terror, yes, but in terror he created a kind of peace the land had forgotten. He was no saint, but he was not chaos. He was balance, brutal, precise, relentless. He had no father, no kingdom, no mercy, only memory, and fury sharpened into vision. He did not return to wear a crown, but to forge one, from bone and fire. And the people said, before we feared thieves, now we only fear one man, and yet we sleep better. American 1457s or The Empire Beneath Silence. By 1457, Vlad was no longer merely a prince, he was a sovereign shaped by scars. No longer the exile, no longer the claimant, he was ruler, and Wallachia was silent. But silence is not peace. Silence is fear, perfected. The eyes in every alley. Vlad created a network of informants, from merchants to beggars, priests to prisoners. No whisper was safe, no corner unguarded. People began speaking in code, or not speaking at all. Trust dissolved. Spouses feared each other. Children watched their parents. Wallachia became a kingdom of silence, ruled by rumor and fear. 1458, the law of iron and blood. He reformed the courts. Justice was now swift and theatrical. Thieves had hands cut off in public squares. Liars had tongues torn out before crowds. Nobles who exploited the poor were flayed alive, their screams echoing through marble halls. To some, it was horror. To others, justice finally made visible. 1459, the forest of stakes. To foreign envoys, Vlad was charming, eloquent, even witty. But those who challenged him disappeared. On the roads to Targovishte, a new forest rose, made not of trees but stakes. Thousands impaled, criminals, rebels, dissenters. It sent a message. This land does not tolerate disobedience. A German merchant wrote, "You could smell death miles before you saw the city." 1460, the shadow and the light. Trade flourished, Roads were safe, villages well fed. But people stopped laughing. Children stopped singing. Peace had come, but it was the peace of graves. Vlad was loved, Vlad was feared. Vlad was alone. He had built a perfect empire, efficient, obedient, clean. But in the process, he had erased the soul of his people, and perhaps of himself. The crown cast in shadow. They called him tyrant, savior, demon, God. But Vlad was none of them. He was a man, broken, brilliant, and burdened. His empire stood strong, but cast no shadow, because everything was already dark.
Constantinople had fallen. The crescent moon now rose where crosses once stood. Sultan Mehmed II, conqueror of Byzantium, turned his gaze north, to Wallachia, to Vlad. He sent envoys bearing gifts, scrolls of peace, and an unspoken warning. Vlad welcomed them, fed them, laughed with them, then had them nailed to wooden stakes and left for the birds. A reply carved in blood. Diplomatic notes flew across the Danube. Polite, flowery, full of venom. Mehmed demanded tribute. Vlad delayed. The Sultan warned of war. Vlad sent gold, wrapped in the heads of Ottoman spies. It was not just defiance. It was theater. Mehmed had had enough. He marched with an army of over 90,000 men. Vlad had less than 30,000, most farmers with blades. He knew he could not win head-on, so he poisoned wells, burned crops, killed livestock. He sent sick men to wander among the Turks, plague as weapon. And one night, he disappeared into the Ottoman camp. In the chaos, he tried to assassinate Mehmed. Steel clashed, smoke burned. Fires lit up silk tents like stars falling. He failed, but left thousands of Turks dead before vanishing into the forests. When Mehmed entered Targovishte, he found a garden, not of flowers, of corpses. 20,000 impaled bodies surrounded the city. Turkish soldiers vomited. Some wept. Even Mehmed paused. He said, "A man who can do this cannot be conquered." But even a forest of stakes cannot hold back a tide of enemies forever. Whispers began in Wallachia. Boyars who once cheered Vlad now met in secret. Hungry, smelling opportunity, withdrew support. Vlad's victories turned into isolation, his strength into paranoia. In the bitter winter of 1462, surrounded, outnumbered, betrayed, Vlad vanished once again. But not without leaving behind a legend soaked in fire and vengeance. He stood against an empire and made it bleed, but power is a lonely crown. He ruled through fear and was devoured by it. The world would remember Vlad the Impaler, but forget the broken prince beneath the armor. But the story is not over, because before the night ends, a final betrayal waits in the shadows. After the Ottomans withdrew, the silence that followed was not peace, it was betrayal. The Wallachian boyars who once cheered Vlad now whispered daggers behind tapestries. Desperate for support, Vlad turned to Hungary, but King Matthias Corvinus, once an ally, had other plans. In November 1462, Vlad was captured, not by an enemy army, but by a supposed friend. Vlad spent 12 years in captivity in a castle cell not far from Buda. He was not tortured, he was forgotten. No court, no sword, no kingdom. He stared at stone walls and heard only rats and the echo of his own breath. But the darkness did not break him, it fermented him. Legends say he impaled mice on toothpicks, that he whispered to shadows, laughed with ghosts. He was no longer just Vlad, he was becoming Dracula. In 1474, the Ottomans advanced into Moldavia. Fear spread through Eastern Europe. Hungary, desperate for a strong hand, turned to the one man they once caged. They released Vlad.
Vlad returned to Wallachia, but it was not the same land, and he was not the same man. The people whispered, "Is it him or his ghost?" His face was gaunt, his hair grayer, his eyes deeper. There was no fire, only embers. He reclaimed the throne for the third time, but his empire was brittle. The boyars never forgot. In a forest near Snagov, Vlad rode out with a small retinue. He believed he was meeting allies. Instead, he was ambushed, not by Turks, but by Wallachians. His head was severed, sent to the Sultan in Constantinople, preserved in honey. The same Sultan who once feared him, now smiled. Vlad died, but he did not disappear. His name crossed borders. His cruelty became legend. His thirst for justice twisted into thirst for blood. They called him Dracula, son of the dragon, son of the devil. But maybe he was just a man trying to bring order to chaos and losing himself in the process. After his death, Wallachia plunged into turmoil. The boyars scrambled for power. The Ottomans increased their grip. The people, caught in between, mourned not just a ruler, but the last man who dared to defy empires. In the end, his legacy was not just in fear, but in the silence that followed, a silence that asked, was it worth it? This is not just the story of Dracula, it's the story of how power consumes. Subscribe to Obscure Truths for more tales where legends are born and humanity is tested.